My Govanin, and welcome back to Medieval Art. I'm Dr. Brian Keane, and again, I have the pleasure to be joined by Dave Lewis of Cinemillennials. This week's episode was titled Partings, and the theme resonated across all the storylines that we've seen so far, from the Númenóreans to the Harfoot wanderings with the stranger, to the Southlands and the elf-dwarf dinner in Linden. So Dave, where in Middle-earth or the Sundering Sea should we start our quest?
I think we should start in Linden. I think this is one of the biggest talking points through all across the fandom, whether you're really into the lore like us or just into the movies and TV show. Let's talk about Elrond Peridil, which is a slight against him, I think, and the Song of the Roots of the Hithaeglir. I think where he says it's apocryphal. This could be interesting. This is part of the show that I'm trying to come to grasp with. The Roots of the Hithaeglir is not a part of Tolkien's writings. He does not have a mithril origin story. So this is really them using this idea of other minds and hands that Tolkien talks about. So the story is a elf of pure heart, pure good heart, is defending this tree, as you can see behind Brian, against a Balrog of Morgoth. And the lightning strikes and mithril is born in the mountains of Khazad-dûm. To me, this kind of felt like a Disneyfied version of a Grimm's fairy tale, which I wasn't crazy about. However, I do think this is one of the many lies that Annatar, Sauron, has put out into the world, and I think he'll eventually be revealed as telling these lies and these apocryphal stories. In the last episode, I think he's really manipulating Celebrimbor, who is one of Gil-Galad's highest lords on this council, as they talked about and referenced in episode 1. I think in turn, he is clearly using Gil-Galad to get his way, and he is also using Gil-Galad's power as High King to affect Elrond going forward with this.
I like your idea because it also speaks to the fact that Annatar can be around for quite a long time behind the shadows. And if he is part of this private council, so much so that this Song of the Roots of the Hithaeglir becomes part of common knowledge, that someone even like Elrond would have been familiar with such a tale, that speaks in some ways to how pervasive these lies are, just like the sort of decay of the trees within Linden, that they're now noticing it more fully, right? I think your point is really spot on, and it's led a number of personalities in the fandom to start questioning. But I think, as you rightly say, it's grounded in Apocrypha, so we know that there's questionable reliance on the origin. I mean, we know from the lore where the other Silmarils end up, and that leaves some room for speculation. Could this be an adjustment to a narrative? We have Eärendil with his ship, sailing off, and we saw a reference to Eärendil's star, the Silmaril, in the statue in Armenelos in Númenor. We know that Medros throws one of his into the volcano, and I know that there are some who have said this could be a conflation of a kind of Medros story, but then with Meglor throwing it into the sea. So we know where they are. I'm always pleased to hear these references to other bits of lore. And then I'll admit, just on a sort of humorous point, the minute I heard Gil-Galad reference this Song of the Roots of the Hithaeglir, I just kept thinking of this moment from the Fellowship of the Ring when Arwen, as Glorfindel, makes this beautiful quote about Nino Hithaeglir lasto bethdair, Drimonin Bruin and Daninu Lyre, asking the rivers of the waters of the Misty Mountain and the Bruinen to cover the ring rates. So right. This moment for me where I immediately leapt thinking, great, there's a linguistic connection. I'm hearing words that I know. And speaking of these, Misty Mountains and Balrogs, I just keep thinking that the conflation of a dwarf fighting an elf fighting a Balrog reminds me of Glorfindel's story, and the fact that we have this stranger return to Middle Earth. I suspect it could be Glorfindel. I know many of us are looking for it to be Gandalf or Saruman or Radagast or a blue wizard, but Glorfindel would have those abilities of the Istari that rival them in power. And since we haven't seen the ears of the stranger yet, at least I can't recall, I'm hopeful. So we have a lot to still think about. I think that's what you and I talked about before the recording, is that there's so much still for us to anticipate. And I think that's what makes the show wonderful. We can debate, who is this person? Is this lore? Is this not? But that's what makes Tolkien's writing so wonderful, that we're seeing a kind of both adaptation and expansion of the world.
Yeah, I mean, I think Glorfindel will be a really, really cool character to have. He's one of the most noble of elves. He faces Morgoth himself. I mean, he's got a bunch of really cool stuff. Or am I getting Fingolfin? Oh, I'm getting Fingolfin
Well,
confused.
but yeah, no, we have, they both have really incredible storylines. But even, I mean,
Yes.
Glorfindel is, you know, I think so many fans were so upset in some ways that Arwen was given that
Yes.
scene with
That's
the ring
right.
wraiths. That is one of Glorfindel's great scenes in the Fellowship, and yet it was, I think it fit really well in Peter Jackson's world. But this would be another way to introduce a character. If Adar is a character that we are also suspecting is from earlier lore, you know, there's possibilities that we're going to be both pleased and surprised along the way.
Oh, I mean, people are, that's the big theory right now. Maybe he's Maeglin, maybe he's Maglor, these tragic stories with the gauntlet on his hand where he could be covering up a Silmaril burn or anything like that. I think what you're saying to the writing, I think they have the essence of Tolkien. They have this thing, and even with the theory that I think I have, I think even with that, they understand Sauron. They understand the myths and legends and how they are going to adapt that within the writing. It's something that is super fascinating because, you know, there's a lot of backlash where people think it's clunky. I think we're meant to think that, ooh, Gil-Galad's not that good of a king. He's not that nice of a king. Oh, we're being told to believe by Adar. Not everything you think is true. A lot of things you've been lied to. So maybe we are being lied to. Maybe we're being, as the audience, manipulated because we love these characters so much. We love these events so much. Maybe we're being twisted.
I love this, but I think we absolutely are. I think the showrunners, the writers, they are all messing with us. And that is, they are assuming in that sense, then the role of Anatar, and we are going right along with it. And I think that's what's so wonderful. You know, this episode also had a number of really important dialogues that we touched on.
Yes.
And if we stay in Linden, I think you reminded me of that great line that Gil-Galad had about hope. So can you tell us more about that? Because I think it was important that we focus on it.
Yeah, I think hope is probably one of the most impactful themes in Tolkien's work. And he talks about how we can't give up this hope. But at the same time, they think that hope is almost lost. And to me, that doesn't feel very elven. That doesn't feel very Noldrin to me, because how can these people endure without this hope? How do they expect, oh yeah, you know, we're just going to wither and go away? That's not something that these people thought. They have two different versions of hope throughout the lore. And with that, it's just hard for me to believe that they would just give up so easily because of one thing that's happening. Yes, it's a tree. Yes, it's representative. Do we think the Silmarils are really going to save us? I mean, look at the destruction that they caused for generations. So why would this one piece, again, of jewelry help us out?
I agree. I mean, I think it speaks to the greater lore of, you know, how the perspectives that these different races bring to the show and their own long view in the history of Arda. The other quote that was not about hope so much, but that stood out to me was Galadriel's dialogue with Halbrand, where she talks about her company mutinying against her, her closest friend and king conspiring to send her into exile. And then the line that she says, they acted as they did because I believed they could no longer distinguish from me the evil that I was fighting. And that just reminded me of Gil-Galad's statement about the wind that can just as soon put out a flame and spread it. So some of this writing is really, it's touching back and forward across the show. And I'm seeing the character development for each of these individuals. And as you started off our discussion with Elrond Peredil, half elven, his journey is also interesting. We have less than 30 seconds that we can sort of conclude. There's so much more we wanted to say about spirituality and sacred with the Elendili, the sacred with Tar Palantir and Miriel, the dialogue of stone for the dwarves. So for our parting thoughts, Dave, give it to us. What are we looking forward to in our next week's great showdown?
I'm looking forward to having more of this spirituality in this. I'm really looking forward to, are we going to get the Ban of Manwë? Are we going to get more Sauron cultists where their shield is this very same constellation as the Strangers? We're getting a lot of really interesting things, but I am excited to see what the combat's like. I love the helmet of Elendil. I love their designs. But all in all, you know, I'm still unsure, but I'm really looking forward to seeing where they're going to go with everything.
And not all who wander are lost.